God tells Avraham that when he goes to the land which he will show him, there I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you. I will give you renown. And you will be a blessing. One of the interpretations which Rashi cites, which is a midrash, in the Amidah, which is the first bracha of the Shemon Esrei, we say Elokei Avraham, the God of Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov, the God of Avraham, the God of Yitzchak, the God of Yaakov. So this famous question which is asked, it'd be enough to say Elokei Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov. He's the God of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Why by each one of the patriarchs do we identify this relationship with God? To repeat it 3 times be enough. He's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But yet, every time we mention one of the patriarchs, the relationship is repeated. Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Yaakov. So the answer which is given, which is universally accepted, that each of the patriarchs displayed and emulated another characteristic of God, another one of his attributes. Avraham was chesed. So the way he served God was with the attribute of chesed. Yitzchak was exactness, the attribute of justice. That's what we find, that Yitzchak wasn't very much involved with people. It was self-perfection. Yaakov is rachmim, the attribute of mercy. Since he was the one who was more greatly imbued with Torah than the others, he had a greater level of objectivity that he was able to evaluate things at that special level. Therefore, he represents rachmim. So each of them had their own approach in terms of relation with God. So therefore, each one's identified with his uniqueness regarding his relationship with Hashem, Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov. But the first one, which is mentioned, is Elokei Avraham. Avraham is the founding father. Yitzchak was his son. Yaakov was his grandson. So you would say that the reason why they're mentioned in this order, because sequentially, Avraham is the grandfather, Yitzchak is the son, and Yaakov is the grandson. But each of them was special in their own right. When you conclude the blessing, the first bracha of the Amidah, we conclude Mogain Avraham. God is the shield of Avraham. But if each of the patriarchs were as unique as the other, we should conclude all 3. As it's Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov, we should conclude Baruch Atah Hashem, Mogain Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov. He's the shield of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, yet we only conclude with Avraham, who's the founding patriarch. And that's what the Torah, that's what Hashem is saying to Avraham. Eschol Goy Godel. They will say, Elokei Avraham, you are the great nation. I will bless you. They will say, Elokei Yitzchak, I will give you renown, great renown. Tzagad L'Shmecha. I will advance your name. Maybe you should conclude all 3. B'yei bracha. You will be the bracha. The bracha, the way it will be articulated, it's uniquely you, the other 2 are not mentioned. What is the understanding? If each of the patriarchs were essential to be the foundation of the Jewish people, and this eternal nation was built on that foundation, and the DNA of the Jew, spiritually speaking, the genealogy of the Jew was rooted in Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. So why don't we conclude, blessed is God, Mogain Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, but yet God says, no, it will be attributed to you. You'll be the blessing. Now, when was Avraham circumcised? Avraham was circumcised at the age of 99. So this famous question which is asked, if Avraham kept the whole Torah in its entirety, before it was given, as it's alluded to in this week's portion, because the numerical value of Akev is 172. Akev Shama Avram Mikoli, because Avram heeded my voice, my Torah, and my mitzvah. That means Avram kept the Torah's entirety, the written, the oral, and even rabbinic fences. So if the question is, so why didn't he circumcise? If he kept the whole Torah's entirety before it was given, as he knew of the eating matzah on Pesach, although he's not obligated, and sending away the mother bird when he comes upon her to take its chicks, and all the others, and all the nuances of these laws, which are the oral law, why didn't he circumcise himself? Circumcision is part of the written law. He only waited till the age of 99 to be directly commanded by God to have himself circumcised. That's a famous question which is asked. So there's a famous answer from the Brisker Rav, that the Brisker Rav answer is, the Talmud tells us, the greater is the accomplishment of one who performs in an obligated state rather than in a non-obligated state. Meaning, a person has no obligation to fulfill a certain commandment, certain mitzvah, certain dictate. Another person does have. Whose level of accomplishment is greater? So logically, you would say, if you're obligated, you have no choice. If you're not obligated, it's your prerogative. It's your initiative. So seemingly, the non-obligated accomplishment should be greater than one who has no choice. It's compulsory. He must do it. But yet the Gemara concludes, in the conclusion, the greater is the one who performs in an obligated state than the one who performs in a non-obligated state. So the commentators explain why, that if you're obligated to observe the particular mitzvah, that particular dictate, there is a greater resistance not to do it. Why? Because since you commanded, there's an evil inclination that attempts to deny you and cause you to fail. If you're not obligated, the non-performance, there's no claim against the person. If that's the case, do it or don't do it, it really doesn't make that much of a difference. But if you're obligated to do, the evil inclination through its machinations leaves no stone unturned to prevent you from doing the mitzvah. So if you're able to succeed and do the mitzvah, because you're obligated, the end result, the accomplishment, has greater value. This is how the commentators explain why greater is the one who's commanded to perform than the one who's not commanded to perform. So since Avraham Avinu ultimately knew that he will be obligated and commanded to circumcise himself, if he would circumcise himself premature, there's no impediment. There's no challenge. Therefore, the value of that circumcision is not the same. But ultimately, when he will be commanded to circumcise himself, then the evil inclination immediately intervenes. He's on the scene to try to prevent it. Therefore, the end result is greater. Therefore, Avraham Avinu delayed circumcision till the age of 99. This is the answer of the Brisker Rav. But you're able to say, it's not contradictory to this. The Mishnah tells us, the Arabs were always circumcised, even when they were pagans. Why were they circumcised? Because since Avraham Avinu was circumcised, and Yishmael initially, who's the founding father of all of the Arab nations, he was circumcised, so all Arabs circumcised themselves. That's what they do. But the Arab who circumcises himself, does he have the status of a circumcised person? The answer is no. He's called a circumcised Arab. That's what he's referred to in the halachic terms, meaning it's purely a cosmetic procedure. What is circumcision in its essence? So it's explained by the commentaries. We find that the Torah tells us that at the end of time, God will circumcise your hearts and the hearts of your children. Meaning, so Nachmanides explains that after the sin of the Eitz Hadas, the tree of knowledge, due to the putrefaction of the spirituality of Adam, there was a covering on the heart, the emotion, the ability to process and to relate is all rooted in the heart. It became off balance. All the desires for everything which is contrary to spirituality is embedded in the heart due to the Eitz Hadas, to the tree of knowledge. At the end of time, where evil will be expunged from existence, this is the meaning. God will circumcise your hearts and the hearts of your children. There will no longer be an inclination to do evil, because the heart there then will be pure. It will not be impacted as a result of what happened in the past, that Adam ingested the fruit which contained that evil, which was the tree of knowledge. However, the Jew was given, Avraham was given the mitzvah of circumcision, that Adam, we mentioned many times, the name of the Zohar, which is cited in Orach Chaim HaKodesh, Adam was created as an uncircumcised, as a circumcised person, meaning he had no foreskin. When he ate of the tree of knowledge, which is good and evil, the evil manifested itself, expressed itself with a covering on his male organ. The whole concept of evil, if a person would understand the ramifications, the consequence of evil, nobody would go near it. It's only because the evil inclination presents it in the most attractive manner, we believe it's something which is beneficial, or it's something which we're able to gain much through it. But we don't have really, it's a lack of clarity. Like they say in Hebrew, the word olam means world. Olam is world. But the world, the physical world, is helem. Helem means concealment. We live in a world with tremendous concealment. That's what the world is. That concealment came about as a result of the tree of knowledge being eaten, because Adam became addicted to evil, and that addiction causes him not to have clear vision and sensitivities to what he naturally would have had. Therefore, olam is helem. That's what it is. Avraham was able to develop himself and advance himself, spiritually speaking, through the tests and through many things, the way he served God and espousing monotheism, that he was ready for that leap, that advancement, that if he would remove the foreskin, which is the outer covering of that organ, he'll be able to impact on that covering of the heart to some degree, that he'll be able to take control of his inhibitions, of his drives. That mitzvah was only given to Avraham because Avraham developed and matured to that level. But a person who doesn't have that level, that internal level of spirituality, the removal of the foreskin is purely a superficial, it's a cosmetic procedure. So anybody else who circumcises himself, other than Avraham, it's meaningless, it means nothing. So if Avraham would have circumcised himself earlier, it was purely removing the outer foreskin. It wouldn't have had any effect on his soul, on his essence. Therefore, he waited till 99 when he be commanded, because then he was ready to be affected, because then it became an impediment. Once it's an impediment, you remove it. That happened at the age of 99. But what did that foreskin represent? Evil. Because of that evil, the nations of the world and Adam was disenfranchised. That severed his relation with God. Avraham Avinu was able to accomplish within himself to purge it to that limited level, but it was sufficient that he should be able to function within the context and the capacity of Torah mitzvos, 248 positive commandments 365 negative commandments. He was able to achieve that within himself. Therefore, he can have a relation with God. The nations of the world that they have this evil embedded in their being, all their capacity, spiritually speaking, is 7 Noahide laws. Don't cross seven lines. 7 lines have been drawn in the sand. Don't cross those lines, which are the 7 Noahide laws. But the more advanced level, the 365 negative commandments, the positive commandments, which are growth commandments, advancing yourself, which will enable you to have a relation with God, the non-Jew has no relevance to that. Of course, he possesses and is embedded with the evil of the tree of knowledge, and God has no relevance to evil. Therefore, God can have a relation with the non-Jew, only the Jew, who through Avraham expunged the sufficient evil that he could have a relation with God. And that's why he was given the mitzvah of circumcision. So let's understand that. When Avraham matured and advanced to the level of 99, God says, now is the time. Remove the foreskin. Now Avraham has detached himself sufficiently from evil that he's able to have a relation with God. Avraham achieved that. Avraham became a new being. At that moment, he could contend with issues which before he couldn't contend with, spiritually speaking, because he didn't have sufficient acuity and sensitivity to be able to detect many things. So who is the founding father of the Jewish? Not because he was the first one to recognize God, because he's the one who achieved that level of purging expungement from himself. And that's why Yitzchak and Yaakov followed. They followed only because he already recreated that reality that the evil no longer touches his progeny. But who created that reality? Avraham, through his challenges and through his choices. Therefore, it's true. Yitzchak was circumcised. It's Elokei Yitzchak. It's Elokei Yaakov. But ultimately, why were they able to be who they were? It was Elokei Avraham. Because Avraham achieved a level of advancement, perfection, that he was able to merit the mitzvah of circumcision, which represents removal of the evil, to be able to take full control. Therefore, v'yeh bracha. Although we say Elokei Avraham, and we say Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov, but ultimately, who gets credit for everything? Because if Avraham wouldn't have achieved within himself what he did achieve, there wouldn't have been a Yitzchak and there wouldn't have been a Yaakov. So give credit to a credit is due, as we say. What do we conclude? How does the blessing conclude? Moged Avraham. God is the shield of Avraham because the relationship of removal of evil began with Avraham, and it was only because of Avraham. So therefore, Avraham is accredited with everything, and therefore the bracha of the Amidah, the first blessing, concludes with Magen Avraham and not with the other 2 patriarchs, because it was all due to his level of initiative who achieved this level of detachment from evil. To prove this point, when Avraham was circumcised, he had a name change. The hay was added to his name. And we mentioned why the hay. It wasn't just a label. He was given the hay because Hashem said to Avraham that the physical world was created with the spirituality of the letter hay. And he said to Avraham, what it takes to create all existence, to create you as a different being with another level of capacity, to contend with physicality, I have to recreate the world. So you are yourself, when I add that hay, what all the spirituality that lies in that hay, which brought about physical existence, that will bring about the change and give you a different dimension of being due to the hay. Because again, he's no longer that original being. The world was created with the hay before it was putrefied. Adam putrefied that world. And Avraham is no longer part of that world because he was able to achieve within himself that level of expungement that he was given the midst of circumcision to affect that evil, the internal evil. So therefore, he had to be recreated to be the equivalent of pre-sin of Adam. And therefore, now we can contend with all the issues. As a result of that, what does Avraham represent? The world pre-sin of Adam. The world that was meant to advance, that the Torah could be given in his world, which are the Jewish people. That the Jewish people could be in the land of Israel, which is the Holy Land, Eretz HaKadosha, the land which God oversees personally. There's no archangel. But that's only because Avram is a different entity. He's not the putrefied world. He's a recreation of the original world, which was created with that same letter hey, except the first world became malfunctioned, became putrefied, became toxic, and therefore couldn't function. So who's the counterbalance to the world to evil? Avram. You have two worlds, a hay world, which is the first creation, and the new creation, which is called the Avram world, which is called the world of the Jews. It's called the Torah world. It's the Jewish people world, different world. It's very interesting. A Jew is not permitted to marry a non-Jew. And Ramchal speaks about this. You'd say, why? The non-Jew biologically is no different than the Jew, although there are biological differences in terms of the genetic makeup, even the physical genetic makeup. There's certain things Jews have relevance to, the non-Jew doesn't have. But I'm speaking purely in the spiritual sense. Although we look alike, and we have intellect as they have intellect, and we're subject to certain things which they're subject to. But nevertheless, in the essence of what we are, what they are, we're worlds apart. We're not from the same world. The world, the Noahide world, is the world that was created that was putrefied. That human being has no relevance to eternity. That's a finite being at every level of being limited. The Jew, being a descendant of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, they are the new world, the recreated world, which was created with that same hay, except that hay, which word about new creation, was not putrefied. So therefore, we're talking about two different beings. You can't intermingle them. Therefore, the Jew can only marry a Jew, and the Gentile is not permitted to marry the Jew, and the Jew is not permitted to marry the Gentile for this reason. Exactly as we're explaining it. So we spoke the other day. So if a non-Jew wants to convert, how does he convert? He's part of that original world. The world that became corrupted due to the tree of knowledge. So Ramchal explains, the Torah gives a procedure. It's called conversion. And if you meet all the criteria of what Jewish conversion is, which is prescribed by the Torah, then the non-Jew is able to overcome and not be affected by the handicap of the tree of knowledge, which every Gentile is. How was that? And I mentioned this many times. Every Jew is an original Jew, identifies with the tribe. A convert is not part of any tribe. He's a Jew, but not part of a tribe. And it has halakhic ramifications. For instance, an illegitimate Jew, a child that was born of an incestuous or adulterous relationship, that child is called a mamzer. The Torah says, "Lo yavo mamzer b'kal Hashem." An illegitimate Jew is not to marry into the congregation of God. Who's the congregation of God? if you're one of the 12 tribes of Israel, a convert is not one of the 12 tribes. Although he's a full-fledged Jew, although he has a share in the world to come, or she has a share in the world to come. But it's not identified as Kal Hashem. Therefore, a convert is permitted to marry a mamzer, an illegitimate Jew. Because it's not part of the profile of the Jewish people. So how does the convert become a convert? Because if you follow the Torah's procedure, he says, the Ramchal, it's like you graft a branch onto a tree. And if the graft is done correctly, eventually the branch becomes part of the ecology of the tree. So the ecosystem of the tree the branch becomes part of that. When the non-Jew goes through conversion, which is prescribed by the Torah how it happens, and it's done correctly, the non-Jew is grafted onto the Jewish people. Once that graft takes place, that attach takes place, all the energies that flow through the Jewish people, the spiritual energies, flow through the non-Jew. As a result of that, there's a change, a metamorphosis in the soul of the non-Jew, that the non-Jewish soul becomes a Jewish soul. It has that capacity. That's how it happens. But in terms of identity, it's not identified as one of the tribes. Therefore, the convert is permitted to marry the illegitimate Jew. But a Jew who is an original Jew, who has the profile of the infrastructure of the Jewish people, is not permitted to marry that illegitimate child. To bring it to another level, we've mentioned many times that although we speak about 12 tribes, but factually speaking, there were 13 tribes. There were 12 tribes who received a portion of the land. One tribe, which is the 13th, did not receive a portion of the land. Who's that? Levi. Levi did not receive a portion. Levi and the Kohen. So in essence, how many tribes are there? The 13. What is the gematria, the numerical value of 13? What does it spell? Echod. The word one is numerically 13. Now, the Maral adds to that. The Maral of Prague says, if you want to evaluate the various levels of spirituality within the Jewish people, who is the most spiritual of all the 13? Levi. Levi was the only tribe who did not engage with the golden calf. Levi, the lead of Levi is the Kohen. So if you would rate them and grade them, spiritually speaking, what grading would you give them? They're Aleph. Aleph, way up on top. Now, Yaakov had 4 wives. 2 of his wives were matriarchs. 2 of his wives were concubines. The matriarchs were Rachel and Leah. The concubines were Bilhah and Zilpah. There were 8 children born to the matriarchs. There were 4 children born to the concubines, 2 to each. So if you want to grade the different spiritual capacity of Jewish people, you have Levi is the ultimate. That's Aleph. 8 Ches are the children of the matriarchs. 4 are the children of the concubines. So not only are we 13 in number, which is Echad, but even in the gradations, it's Aleph Ches Dal, which is Echad. Why? Is it just coincidental? Numerically, with 13 and gradation, we're Aleph Ches Dal? No. It's because since we're meant to have that special relationship to God, to have the level of compatibility with God, we need the commonality. The commonality is we're Echad, he's Echad. And we're the only tribe that's Echad. We're the only nation in the world that's Echad. That uniqueness. So in every sense of the word, we're Aleph Ches Dalet. Therefore, we could cleave to God. So retaining the purity of the Aleph Ches Dalet, that's essential. You can't in any way diminish that. If the mamzer would marry into Kal Hashem, it would malfunction the Echad. Therefore, the illegitimate Jew cannot marry into Kal Hashem, which is Aleph Ches Dalet. But the convert, who's not identified as a tribe, although the person is a full-fledged Jew, that person is permitted to marry the illegitimate Jew. because it's not a diminishment of the echad. That's the understanding based on what we're saying. But who launched and set the dynamic that there should be an echad? Yaakov, Avraham Avinu, the monotheist, who originally asked that question, Mi Balabira, who's the master of the citadel? And God says, Ani Balabira. Because Avraham was not willing to compromise his status of truth to any degree. God, who's the source of all truth, came and revealed himself and said to Avraham, I am the master of the citadel. I am the creator of the world. I'm the master of the universe. And Hashem is Echad. Therefore, we became Echad at Sinai, Aleph, Ches, Dalid, 13, and gradations of 1, 8, and 4.